A car accident injured my leg. Liu Arkin, who had promised to take care of me, suddenly said something urgent had come up and couldn't come. Leaning on crutches, I struggled on my own, getting admitted to the hospital. Running up and down, I suddenly saw her assistant's social media update. Far from home, but not lonely. So grateful that the boss made a special effort to be with me. Accompanied by a photo of Liu Arkin sleeping peacefully, her profile visible. In the past, I would have been relentless in my anger. But now, I simply gave it a casual like and left a comment. She's working so hard. Isn't it only right to repay her with devotion? Initially, when Liu Arkin said she had urgent business, I wasn't upset. I even reminded her to take care of herself, not to overwork. I assured her everything was fine on my end, dragging my injured leg. Leaning on crutches, I managed everything, and finally got all the hospital admission procedures done. But then I saw a post from Mej B. Liu Arkin's hair was slightly disheveled, as she lay asleep on his sofa, with his hand slightly visible in the photo, as if cradling her face. He captioned it, "Far from home, but not lonely. So grateful that the boss made a special effort to be with me." I couldn't take it anymore. I called Liu Arkin, demanding, "Didn't you say you had urgent business?" She was annoyed. Jay-Z is my assistant. He just moved and didn't know how to handle anything. Isn't it natural that I help him out? Jay Bada, why do you always make a fuss over nothing? Then she hung up the phone and blocked me on all platforms. I stayed in the hospital alone for 5 days. Even going to the bathroom was a struggle. The kind man in the next bed, who was there to take care of his family, saw that I had no one to look after me and often offered me extra help. As for Liu Arkin, she never contacted me, not even once. It wasn't until the afternoon of my discharge day that she took the initiative to message me. "I'll come to be with you." I understood that this was her way of making peace between her and me. It had always been this way. Every time we argued because of her and Mej B, she would block me. When she'd unblock me, whether in a week or a month, depended entirely on her mood. This time, her sudden initiative would have made me happy in the past, but she didn't realize that those 5 lonely days in the hospital had given me a lot to think about. I had come to realize many things. This relationship was something I needed to seriously reconsider. So I only replied to her with, "No need. I'm already processing my discharge papers." After that, I went back to handling my own matters. It wasn't until I was finished that I saw another message from her. "I'll pick you up at 5. Wait for me." I stood at the hospital entrance when a taxi driver enthusiastically called out, "Need a ride?" I answered, "No. I'm waiting for someone." 5 o'clock came quickly. I looked around several times, but didn't see Liu Arkin's car. One by one, people left the hospital, hailing taxis to go home. The sky grew darker. Another taxi pulled up and asked, "Need a ride, buddy? I've seen you waiting here for quite a while." I glanced at my phone. It was already 9:30. Still no message from Liu Arkin. "Let's go," I said. I nodded at the driver. Once I got home, I shut the door behind me. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the sofa. And even now, Liu Arkin was nowhere to be seen, nor did she contact me. A notification pinged on my phone. It was another update from Mej B. He had just posted a photo. Liu Arkin, dressed in a silk nightgown, was busy in the kitchen. The caption read, "Almost blew up the kitchen again. Boss said she'd tie me up to prevent future disasters." Oh, how scary. In the past, I would have been furious, calling Liu Arkin right away and demanding an explanation. But now, I simply liked Mej B's post and unfollowed him from my favorites. Just as I exited the social media app, my phone rang. It was my boss, ZJ. I talked to the headquarters and they agreed to increase your annual salary to 1.5 million. Would you consider it now? Shenxiang is my direct superior. She has always been supportive of me. The company is planning to expand into Northern Europe, and she strongly recommended me as the lead. I told her I wasn't suited for life in Northern Europe and didn't want to go. In truth, Shenxiang knew well. I just didn't want to leave Liu Arkin. For 5 years being with her, my entire life revolved around her. I willingly played the house husband for her, turning down overseas opportunities multiple times, and in return, she abandoned me over and over, choosing others instead. It was laughable. Shenxiang continued, and also, the headquarters has agreed to give you paid vacations every year. Enough time for you to fly back and spend time with your girlfriend. Does that work for you? I smiled and replied, no need, Ms. Shen. I don't need any vacations. When should I leave? Ms. Shen burst out laughing on the other end. That's the spirit. You'll depart at the end of the month. There's still some time. Start brushing up on your foreign language skills. I sat down in front of my computer, intending to search for study materials, but my body was utterly exhausted. Before long, I had fallen asleep at the desk. What woke me up was the sound of the door opening. Groggy, I looked up and saw someone standing before me, staring down at me. Startled, I jumped, only to realize it was Liu Arkin. You're back. I yawned and mumbled, still half asleep. She looked at me, her brow furrowed, seeming displeased. I couldn't quite understand why. Was it because I hadn't waited for her, sitting on the sofa like before, ready to question her, to doubt what exactly was going on between her and Mej B, and to start another argument? I went to the hospital to find you, but you weren't there, she said, her lips pressed tight. I called, but you didn't answer. I pulled out my phone and checked. Sure enough, there were several missed calls. Really? I asked with a hint of surprise in my voice. Oh, sorry about that. I thought you weren't coming today, so I took a cab home myself. Her expression turned to shock, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. To think, in the past, even if she was late, I would always wait for her. But I had grown tired of waiting for too long. I used to call her, send her messages, insisting on getting a clear answer. It was often at these times that she'd accuse me of unfounded suspicions, then start a one-sided Cold War, for me to not even ask, and just come home on my own like this. That was something that never happened before. She glanced at my expression, sighed softly. Actually, J. Bo suddenly got sick. He's all alone, far away from home. And it's really not easy for him. I just felt sorry for him. That's all. I didn't wait for her to finish. I nodded slightly in response and turned back, resuming my search for study materials. She paused for a moment, seeming surprised. What? I didn't turn around, keeping my eyes fixed on the computer screen as I asked back. Her tone grew more surprised. Aren't you angry? Why should I be angry? I chuckled. He's your assistant after all, your most reliable subordinate. He deserves extra care. I understand. She was silent for a moment, then leaned down closer to my face, her long hair brushing against my ear. If you can say that. You must be angry. I shook my head with a smile. You're overthinking. She sighed, leaning closer to nuzzle my chin soothingly. It was my fault this time. You haven't eaten yet, have you? I'll go make something for you. I laughed nonchalantly. It's too late. No need to bother. It was true. It was already nearly midnight. Liu Arkin fell silent again, her expression tense, as if she was quite upset. I knew exactly what she was angry about. It was rare for her to extend an olive branch first, and yet I failed to appreciate her gesture. But right now, all I wanted was to focus on my work. I didn't look at her, keeping my gaze fixed on the computer screen. A moment later, Liu Arkin straightened up, slammed the door, and left. I didn't even turn my head, just continued reading the materials for a while. Then I washed up and went to bed, falling into a deep sleep. The next morning, I woke up early, quickly washed my face and brushed my teeth, planning to have a hearty breakfast. But when I opened the door, I saw you Arkin sitting on the living room sofa. For you, injured people need to eat well, she said, pushing the breakfast towards me. It was my favorite brand, so she did remember I was hurt after all. Wow, thank you, I said, smiling as I sat across from her and began eating. Liu Arkin silently watched me for a while before speaking. I didn't go to the hospital to be with you because Mej B had just rented a new place. He didn't know how to use the kitchen appliances and nearly caused an explosion. I went to help him clean up the mess, and I also tidied up his house. I was so exhausted afterwards that I dozed off on his couch. It's not what you think. And about last night, I finished the last bite of my breakfast bun, pulled out a napkin to wipe my hands. Breakfast was great. Thanks for the thought. I'm off to work. Liu Arkin seemed stunned. I was already standing, about to head out. She stood up too, saying, Jay Bada, can't you just listen to my explanation? Explanation what? Oh, you mean about me, Mej B? Didn't we talk about it yesterday? It's okay. I understand. I walked past her, reaching for the keys on the entryway shelf. A trace of guilt crossed Liu Arkin's face, and she suddenly grabbed my hand. Let me drive you. I shook my head, thanks. But there's no need. At this hour, taking the subway is more convenient. Then let me at least take you to the subway station. I shook my head again, no need. It's only a 3-minute walk, faster than driving. As I moved towards the door, she said, there's a party tonight. Come with me, okay? I opened the door, rejecting her. No, I have to work late. In truth, there was no overtime work. I just wanted to spend time learning a new language, and the quiet of the office was preferable. Liu Arkin insisted, I can wait for you. I walked out without stopping. No, I don't want to go. She froze, shocked. In the past, I would have never missed a chance to openly embrace my role as her boyfriend. But now I didn't hesitate. As I stepped out, I heard her angry voice behind me. You better think this through. Don't regret it. I acted like I heard nothing, jogging down the stairs. Since I had confirmed my assignment abroad, my colleagues arranged a dinner to celebrate and bid me farewell. After eating and drinking for hours, someone nudged me with a laugh. Take a look at what Ja Song just posted. He's made you look hilarious. Haha. I opened my social media feed. The first post was an update from Mej B. New role, the beloved protector, with a note self-proclaimed by someone. In the photo below, he was dressed in a sharp suit, his arm slightly bent, with a hand tightly clutching it. Just one look, and it was clear that the hand belonged to Liu Arkin. Liu Arkin had liked the post. She rarely posted on social media, and hardly ever liked anything. Only during our Cold Wars would she deliberately do something like this for me to see. In the past, I would have called her right away, demanding an explanation, maybe even showed up in person to assert my claim. But now, I simply liked the post in return, then turned off my phone. I spent the rest of the night partying with my colleagues and crashed at a nearby hotel we had booked. The next morning, I noticed that Liu Arkin had sent me two messages the previous night. Industry party. It was boring. I only stayed for half an hour. Why aren't you home yet? I replied, went out with colleagues. Half a day later, she responded with a simple, oh, I'll come pick you up. No need. There's something at work. I headed straight to the office. It was only when I arrived that I learned that someone from headquarters was there to discuss the overseas assignment with me. That discussion kept me spinning like a top, and I didn't go home for several days straight. To my surprise, Liu Arkin reached out, asking, "Let's have dinner tonight?" I thought about it and replied, "Sure." There were things that needed to be discussed. It was time to have a proper talk with her. Liu Arkin quickly replied, "I'll pick you up after work." I was about to text back no need when a colleague called out, "J-Bada, Mission wants to see you." I put my phone down on the desk and headed to Mission's office. We spent quite a while going over the details, and when I finally left, it was already 5:30. Liu Arkin called me, "I'm downstairs at your office. Come down." But when I got downstairs, I didn't see her car. Confused for just a moment, I quickly understood. I texted her, "I'm in the building across the street." I had told her before about the change in our office location, but clearly she had forgotten. Soon her car pulled up. The window rolled down, and there was a hint of awkwardness on her face. "Da, I know you switched offices. I just forgot for a second." I smiled unfazed and walked straight to the car, reaching for the door handle, but she stopped me. I froze, turning my head to look at her. "Yes?" Her voice was heavy. "Why are you sitting there?" "Where?" I finally realized she was talking about the passenger seat. But wasn't that seat always reserved for me, J-Bo? In the past, this had been a source of many arguments between us, fights that we had more than once, until the day she shattered a glass right in front of me. "It's just a seat," she said. "Why must you fight with him over everything? I'm the boss, he's the assistant. We have nothing to hide." "Do you secretly wish that something really was going on between us?" she had once accused. We'd had a Cold War for half a month after that, and it was only after countless apologies on my part that she finally took me off her blacklist. Since then, I always sat in the back seat. It was just a seat after all. Where I sat didn't really matter. Meeting her gaze, I smiled indifferently. "The back is fine. I've gotten used to it." But Liu Arkin insisted, "Sit in the front." I paused for a moment, then nodded calmly, "Okay, sure." My tone was so casual, as if she were just a regular friend, and something this small wasn't worth a disagreement. Her eyes stayed on me, watching as I moved to the front passenger seat, fastened the seatbelt, and only then did she start the car. I closed my eyes, leaning back to rest for a moment. After all the non-stop work, I was truly exhausted. I could feel Liu Arkin sneaking glances at me. Of course, the silence in the car was unusual for her. She probably wasn't used to it, because in the past, I would go out of my way to keep the conversation going, hoping she would talk to me a little more. She would usually respond with a simple "yeah" or "okay." If I pushed too hard, she'd frown and say, "I'm driving. Don't distract me." But this quiet and subdued atmosphere between us now was a first. I was starting to drift off when suddenly the phone rang loudly, jolting me awake. It was Liu Arkin's phone, sitting on the dashboard. The caller ID read "Beloved Assistant," with a photo of me and him as the background. The caller ID flashed prominently on the screen. In less than a second, Liu Arkin quickly ended the call, but almost immediately, the phone rang again. She glanced at me and hung up once more. The persistent ringing continued, over and over. Her finger hovered above the screen. Hesitating, I reached over and pressed the answer button. Then I handed the phone to her. She looked at me, paused for a moment, then finally spoke, "Hello?" On the other end was me, J-Bo, his voice heavy and nasal. "Boss, I think I'm sick again. I feel dizzy, I feel awful, boss. Can you come check on me?" Liu Arkin's grip on the phone tightened instinctively, and she glanced sideways at me. Don't worry, I'll contact a doctor for you. Mej B's voice noticeably dimmed. Well, okay. Thanks, boss. Then, a loud bang, followed by a screeching noise. As if someone had fallen, the phone slipped and clattered to the floor, and the call was abruptly cut off. Liu Arkin took a deep breath, her eyes meeting mine, words unspoken. I knew exactly what she was thinking. In the rare moments when she was with me, nearly every time, she would leave because of a call from Mej B. I used to voice my frustration, but she would always be impatient. J-Bo is all alone here, she'd say. Why are you always competing with him? It's just a few streets away. She'd add, you can just walk back home. You're a grown man after all. Do you really need me for something so simple? She'd once asked. There was even a time on the highway, after an argument, she recklessly left me on the emergency lane to go pick up Mej B. It was a traffic cop who eventually found me and brought me home. The cop had intended to reprimand her, but night fell, and she never returned. She didn't pick up her phone either. This time, meeting her gaze, I pointed ahead and said, just drop me off over there. She hesitated for a second, then shook her head, no. It's not safe to walk. I'll drive you home. I smiled and replied, it's only a few streets away. I can walk. I'm a grown man. This isn't something you need to worry about. She seemed to find my words oddly familiar, her expression momentarily stunned. Coming to a stop, I opened the door, only to have my wrist grabbed by Liu Arkin. I'll be back soon. I paused, then asked, do you want me to make dinner for you? She seemed to suddenly remember, no need to cook for yourself, either. I've reserved a meal in a private room, and I'll have them deliver it to the house. I nodded, pulled my hand free, got out of the car, and closed the door behind me. Liu Arkin rolled down the window, urgently calling after me, wait for me to come back. I turned back, gave her a smile, and then walked away. The hotel meal arrived quickly, but there was still no sign of Liu Arkin. An hour passed, and the food was growing cold. I took my portion out, ate it slowly and calmly, then put her portion in the fridge. I sent her a message, your food is in the fridge. There was no reply. I didn't mind, and instead opened my laptop to study some foreign language. Time flew by, and when I glanced at my phone for the time, I was surprised to see it was already 11 o'clock. Liu Arkin still hadn't responded to my message, and I had been so absorbed in studying that I hadn't thought about her at all. It turned out that being fully immersed in work brought a sense of achievement and satisfaction that far exceeded what I felt revolving around Liu Arkin. It was much more genuine, much purer. I casually opened my social media feed. To my surprise, there was no new post from Mej B. In the past, whenever he managed to lure Liu Arkin away from me, he would always post something detailed, boasting or perhaps gloating. But this time, for some reason, it was unusually quiet. I didn't reach out to Liu Arkin. I washed up, went to bed, and slept soundly. The next morning, when I woke up, Liu Arkin was still not around. Even my phone's message notifications were empty. I glanced at it briefly, then went to work on my own. The morning was a whirlwind of tasks, and it wasn't until lunchtime that I picked up my phone to find that Liu Arkin had called me several times. Just then, she called again. Why haven't you been answering? Her tone was urgent, but it lacked the usual anger or accusations. I felt a bit dazed. In the past, whenever I couldn't reach her, I used to do the same, calling her relentlessly. But now, the roles were reversed. I responded to her like I would to a regular colleague. Business like I was busy and didn't see it. There was a slight pause from Liu Arkin. Then she said, Last night, I took J Bo to the hospital. He already had a fever. And then he took a fall. His condition was a bit serious, so I was busy running around taking care of things before she could finish. I let out a small laugh. It's no big deal. Didn't I already say? I understand. Liu Arkin seemed momentarily speechless and stayed silent for a while. After waiting a bit, I asked, anything else? If not, I'll hang up. I'm busy. She suddenly snapped out of it, speaking quickly. Wait, don't hang up. It was my fault yesterday. Let's go to the movies tonight. I already bought the tickets. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. When we first started dating, we used to go to the movies together often. But after J Bo entered the picture, she stopped going to the movies with me. Though she would accompany him to theater shows, I had argued with her about it. She would frown, looking at me with impatience. Theater is a form of artistic enrichment, she'd say. You wouldn't understand. What's so special about movies? They're noisy and boring. Why go to the cinema? You can watch them at home once they're released. I would be both angry and anxious. It's not about the movie. It's about wanting you to spend time with me. But her eyes were full of disdain. Is watching a movie such a challenging task that you need someone to accompany you? Watching with 2 eyes or 4 eyes? Does it make any difference? Of course it does, I would say. Completely different if it had been in the past and she had offered to go to the movies with me. I would have been ecstatic. I probably would have picked her up, spun her around in joy, and kissed her happily. But now, all I could think was how bothersome it would be to have her around. I wouldn't have time to study languages, so I flatly refused. No. I have to work overtime tonight. I don't have the time. To my surprise, she quickly asked, are you the only one working late? If so, I'll come keep you company. I wondered if I had heard her wrong. Those words, I had said them to her before. Back then, she had scoffed dismissively, scolding me with exasperation. Why would anyone need company to work late? Do you think I'm as immature as you? With your mind only full of love and romance? She had always rejected the idea of me accompanying her during her overtime, but now it was she who was offering to be there for me. I rubbed my temples, exhausted, and made up an excuse. No. The whole team is working together. You don't need to come. She seemed momentarily taken aback, so I added, all right, that's it for now. I'll hang up. Okay, take care of yourself. Don't stay out too late. Once my colleagues had all left for the night, I opened my laptop and started studying languages. In this quiet atmosphere, with no one to disturb me, I was completely absorbed in my studies. And before I knew it, it was already 10:30 p.m. The building's lights out time had come. The security guard came by to remind me, so I packed up my laptop, grabbed my bag, and headed downstairs. With my head down, I opened my phone, getting ready to call a cab. Then I heard a voice, da. Liu Arkin was standing not far away, next to her car. The streetlight illuminated her face, highlighting the hurt in her eyes. Why haven't any of your colleagues come out? Her voice was hoarse. I stiffened and lied. They all went home earlier. Da. There were no colleagues working late. You weren't really working overtime, were you? Her tone was low, not asking a question, but stating a fact. I opened my mouth, but couldn't find any words to say. She continued, I've been here since 5:30. I watched each of your colleagues leave one by one. You were the only one left in the office. Confused, I asked, why did you come so early? Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked at me, her voice breaking. Did you forget what today is? What day is today? I asked, bewildered. The first thought that jumped into my mind was that it was exactly 2 weeks until I was supposed to leave for my overseas assignment. It's Valentine's Day, she said. I instinctively widened my eyes. It was true. Earlier, several female colleagues had received large bouquets of roses, and I had joked with them about it. But then I got caught up in my work and completely forgot. My face was full of regret. I'm really sorry. I didn't get you a gift. Liu Arkin pulled me towards the car, opened the door, and took out a large bouquet of roses. Happy Valentine's Day, she said, her eyes red, but she smiled at me. I happily accepted the flowers, leaned in to smell them. They smell wonderful. Thank you. I'll go buy some groceries now and cook a big dinner for us. Consider it my gift to you. But when she heard this, there was no excitement on her face. She just stood there staring at me silently. I understood. In the 5 years we'd been together, I had never forgotten a single occasion, not just Valentine's Day, but also her birthday, the anniversary of us officially being a couple, even the anniversary of the day we first met. She used to complain that I was too much, saying there were over 300 days in a year, and I wanted to celebrate half of them. What's the point of all these celebrations, she'd ask, but I just wanted more moments to be with her. Last Valentine's Day, I had reserved a private room in advance and bought a big bouquet of roses, hoping to surprise her after a long day at work. I wanted to give her a wonderful surprise, but when I called, all I got was a cold response, not going. I'm working overtime, but it's Valentine's Day, I insisted. Just one evening. Can't you skip overtime for once? I asked, unwilling to let it go. In the background, I heard Mej B's voice, boss. Your boyfriend's at it again. Liu Arkin let out a low, dismissive laugh, grumbling to him. So annoying. All he ever thinks about is celebrating holidays. He doesn't even try to improve himself. Does he expect me to sink to his level? She had said to me back then, eat the food yourself. Do whatever you want with the flowers. I don't like those things. She was busy. And then she hung up. Today, everywhere I go, the streets are buzzing about Valentine's Day. Did you really forget? Liu Arkin asked, her face filled with frustration, as she grabbed my wrist. I sighed softly. There are over 300 days in a year, and half of them are just one holiday after another. What's the point of celebrating them all? Hearing those familiar words, she looked utterly shocked, her grip tightening unconsciously. Her nails dug into my skin, making me wince in pain. She realized what she was doing and quickly let go. Apologizing, I'm sorry. I used my free hand to rub my aching forehead. Forget it, I said. It's a holiday. Let's not make things worse for ourselves. This relationship was about to end, but I still wanted it to have a graceful conclusion. So I forced a smile and suggested, how about we go buy groceries now and cook dinner at home? She checked the time on her phone and shook her head, no need. I ordered takeout. It should already be delivered. She took the roses from my hand, placed them in the car, and said, let's go home. Oh, by the way, LDLD is hosting a party tomorrow. I'll go with you. In the past, I had really hoped she would bring me along to let me become a part of her social circle, but she always seemed unwilling. Finally, after much begging, she had once agreed to take me with her. But as soon as the party started, she introduced me to the others by saying, this is Jay Bada. He doesn't know anything, so just ignore him. Then she quietly complained, we're not even from the same circle. Why insist on tagging along? Isn't it embarrassing? Throughout the entire party, I sat off to the side, feeling like I couldn't leave, nor could I stay. I was so uncomfortable that I wished the ground would swallow me up. Since that day, I never brought it up again. Afterwards, she mostly brought Mej B along to events. I voiced my dissatisfaction about it, but she would scold me, saying, he's my assistant, bringing him along is an industry norm. I'm not the only one who does it. Don't let your dirty mind cloud your judgment of others. You're just projecting your own insecurities. I thought about it and decided not to spoil today. So I agreed, alright. After tomorrow's dinner, let's go home. It'll be the perfect time for a final talk. Liu Arkin immediately said, I'll pick you up after work. Although it was called a party, LD had only invited a few of her friends. She was happy to see me and spent quite some time catching up before we even ordered food. Not all the dishes had arrived yet when a familiar voice came from outside. I thought I recognized those voices. Sure enough, it was the boss. And Sister LD too. Mej B walked in, his smile faltering slightly when he saw me sitting next to Liu Arkin, but he quickly plastered the smile back on. My friend stood me up. So could you let me join? Liu Arkin glanced at me, hesitating slightly, and said, I'm not the host today. LD heard this and instinctively looked at me. I smiled at Mej B and said, sure, join us. Mej B walked over, sitting down on the other side of Liu Arkin. Liu Arkin cleared her throat, awkwardly saying, sit across from us instead. Reluctantly, Mej B stood up, clearly unhappy about it. I patted Liu Arkin's hand and said, let him sit there. He's your assistant. It's perfectly normal. LD looked at me in surprise. Mej B gave a slight smile and settled back into his seat. The food started to arrive, and LD raised her glass, making a toast with a non-alcoholic drink. Mej B took a small sip, then handed his glass to Liu Arkin. I don't drink soda. Everyone knows that. Boss, could you drink it for me? No need to drink if you don't want to, I said. This isn't a banquet. There's no pressure to drink. Liu Arkin didn't take the glass. Mej B's eyes widened in surprise. Boss? LD quickly intervened to ease the situation. Waiter, please bring him a cup of warm water. After a while, Mej B frowned as he spat out a piece of pork rib, passing it to Liu Arkin. Boss, taste this. Doesn't it seem undercooked? If it's not cooked properly, just ask the waiter to replace it. Liu Arkin replied, leaning back slightly, firmly shutting him down. Mej B's chopsticks froze midair, staring at her in disbelief. But boss, you used to. Before he could finish, Liu Arkin's expression turned cold, and she set her chopsticks down with a loud thud. This is a private gathering. If you can't keep quiet, then leave. Mej B looked at her in disbelief. Boss, what did you say? Liu Arkin repeated firmly. I said, please leave. LD and the others were stunned glances. A moment later, Mej B, looking deeply hurt, stood up and stormed out like a gust of wind. Liu Arkin glanced nervously at me, grabbing my hand under the table. She then apologized to everyone at the table. Without a word, I gently pulled my hand away, raising my glass with a smile, saying a few polite words to smooth things over. The rest of the meal went relatively well. Back at home, Liu Arkin cheerfully leaned her face close to mine. I pushed her away gently. The air in the private room was really stuffy. You should go take a shower first. Her eyes lit up, and she quickly agreed, heading to the bathroom. She showered in a rush, but when she came out, she was stunned. Dada? I was fully dressed, sitting on the sofa, and nodded at her. We need to talk. Her expression instantly changed, mumbling, it's late. Let's discuss it tomorrow. I looked at her steadily. No. Just one sentence. Let's break up. Liu Arkin's face paled, and panic set in. She quickly moved towards me, trying to sit beside me. I raised a hand and pointed, sit across from me. She hesitated, then sat down on the opposite side, leaning forward, her hands nervously resting on her thighs. She stared at me for a long moment, cleared her throat, and finally asked with difficulty, it's all my fault. I'll have Mej B transferred. Don't leave me. Please? I smiled, you see. You've always known where the problem was. Tears welled up in her eyes, and her voice choked with emotion. I'll change. Tell me where else I went wrong. And I'll change. It's meaningless now. I shook my head. You are keen. You know this. It's too late. A long silence followed. Finally, with a sob in her voice, she asked then, if we break up now, can I start pursuing you again from tonight? Can I? You are keen. I'm leaving the country for my job at the end of this month. I won't be back for a few years. Maybe. I'll never come back. The breakup was amicable. I didn't have many belongings to begin with, so I packed up quickly. One suitcase was all I needed. Her eyes followed me closely as I walked out, and she suddenly asked, so where will you stay? These next few days? I pushed the suitcase forward, not looking back. A friend's place. But the next day after work, as soon as I got downstairs, there she was. Her car parked nearby. She stood by the door, cautiously asking, are you taking the subway again? I can give you a ride. I chuckled and pointed ahead. No need. My friend lent me his car. Her face filled with shock. You can drive? Of course I can, I replied. When we first started dating, she mentioned she often needed to meet clients and how inconvenient it was without a car. And back then, I just wanted to be with her as much as possible, so I never bought a car. Liu Arkin seemed like she wanted to say something more, but I just waved at her politely. Thanks for the offer. See you around. A colleague teased me. Who's that beautiful woman? Just someone I know, I answered casually. Hearing my response, Liu Arkin's face fell, clearly disappointed. I was puzzled. What did she expect me to say? That she was my ex? Someone I'd just broken up with? I shook my head silently, got into the car, and drove away. But the next day, Liu Arkin was there again. I ignored her, only to find she followed me in her car the entire way. And on the third day, it happened again. If this kind of attention had come from her in the past, I would have been over the moon. But now, all I felt was annoyance. Her behavior was just a disturbance to me. I got out of the car and walked over to her. We need to talk. She reached out her hand, as if to pull me into the car. I stepped back, frowning at her. With a pleading expression, she said, let's eat first. Okay. We were surrounded by people, so I glanced around, nodded, and got into her car. In the private room, a large bouquet of roses sat quietly in the middle of the table. I didn't even glance at it, just walked straight to a seat and sat down. I ordered your favorite fruit tea, she said, and all the snacks you like from this place. She smiled, trying to please me. But I looked at her seriously, shaking my head. You know, I didn't come here to eat. Her face went pale with worrying. She quickly forced herself to stay calm. It's okay. We can talk about whatever you want, but let's eat first. As she spoke, the dishes started arriving. Liu Arkin eagerly served me a bowl of pork rib soup, placing it in front of me. Seeing her eager to please expression, I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. Do you remember, I said, the last time when Mej B claimed that the ribs weren't cooked and asked you to taste them for him? Her face went pale. Her hand, holding the bowl, shook slightly in midair. I continued. At that moment, I thought, what a considerate boss, willing to taste food for her subordinate. But it's a pity. Someone so thoughtful wouldn't even taste anything I made. Not even the birthday cake I baked myself, which you dismissed, criticizing me in front of all our friends. You couldn't even afford to buy a proper cake, you said. How could you show up with something so ugly? With every word I said, her face grew paler. By the end, she was struggling to keep the bowl steady, her hands trembling. Sorry, I'm sorry, she muttered, her voice cracking. I took the ball from her, shaking my head with a smile. I don't want your apologies. I just want to tell you. Please don't keep bothering me. You're disrupting my life. Panic filled her eyes as she hurriedly tried to explain. No, I'm not trying to disturb you. I just want to win you back. Broken up. I reiterated. I know, she said. But breaking up was just the end of our past relationship. Now I'm starting over, trying to pursue you again. Liu Ryan placed the roses in front of me. I've already transferred Mej B away, she said, a gesture of sending and receiving. Let's start over, she proposed. I lowered my eyes, gazing at the bouquet of roses. Suddenly, I chuckled. Liu Ryan. Last Valentine's Day, I said, I booked this very room. She froze for a moment, almost tossing the roses aside. Besides, I continued, I also ordered a large bouquet of roses just like this. Guess what? I asked, when I ate the fancy meal alone, and threw the roses into the trash bin. What kind of mood was I in? Liu Ryan's lips moved slightly. She wanted to say something, but couldn't manage to speak. Her eyes grew misty, her gaze filled with deep remorse. Sending and receiving, she said softly, it was all my fault. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling at the end. Your repentance, I said. I don't need it. I stood up, looked her straight in the eye. We have broken up. From now on, I continued, we are strangers. Liu Ryan, I said, let's leave each other with the last shred of dignity. In the days that followed, Liu Ryan indeed didn't show up again. I quickly handled all the necessary procedures, and soon, the day before my departure arrived, a few close friends dragged me out to celebrate. We were having a great time when my phone rang. It was Liu Ryan, Songda, she said. I'm sick, she continued. Stuck in bed, get up. Can you come and see me? I sighed, if you're sick, you should see a doctor. Fearing I might hang up, Liu Ryan's tone grew anxious. The doctor has already prescribed the medicine. But I'm feeling dizzy, she said. Too weak to even boil water for the medicine. A friend, curious, asked, who's sick? Nothing, I replied calmly. Just someone I know. Then turning back to the phone, I added, call Lily. Or any other friend, it doesn't matter. Anyone will do. And I hung up. The next day, I arrived at the airport, only to unexpectedly see Liu Ryan again. She looked haggard, as if still recovering from a serious illness. She wore no makeup. Her hair was hastily tied up, a stark contrast to her usually well-groomed appearance. From afar, she rushed over, eagerly reaching for my suitcase. I stepped back, avoiding her hand. A flicker of disappointment crossed her face, but she quickly regained her composure. Dada, she said. I'll see you off to the gate. We have broken up, I reiterated. Let's not make this more complicated. Liu Ryan's voice trembled. Can I at least say goodbye as a friend? Is that too much to ask? I don't think we can be friends peacefully, I replied. The light in her eyes dimmed completely at my words. She stared at me blankly, tears welling up. Her already pale face lost even more color. She looked like she might faint. In front of her, I blocked her contact. Then I picked up my luggage and said, I've made my decision. Let's not meet again. As I went through security, Liu Ryan still stood in the same spot, her gaze locked onto me. I turned and kept walking, never looking back. Jibata's future will shine endlessly bright. But there will be no more scenes for Ryan Liu.